Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where we are unpacking and deconstructing all of the things that they taught us to believe growing up in fundamentalist, evangelical, and conservative Christian churches. If you don't already know, my name is Christy, and today I want to deconstruct the 10 commandments, which just seems like something we should do, right? We should be looking at the 10 commandments since the Christians love to kind of prop them up as the ultimate moral authority, the list of rules that if you live by them, you will live a perfect and moral life. I think we should be talking about it because, they want to put these up in courthouses and in classrooms and in their churches, and they want to preach them. They want us to live by them. But is the 10 commandments really the most perfect law that we could follow? Could God have done better? Is that the best he could have done? And so I want to approach that today and see what you think. Let's go down the list. Let's approach each commandment and let's kind of figure this out. Let's see if the 10 commandments really hold up to this portrait of a perfect moral system that the Christians paint them out to be. Now, just to let you guys know, my mic stand broke right before I got to recording this video, so I am having to hold this clunky thing, and you might hear it kind of moving around. I'm going to try to be careful. I tend to talk with my hands a lot, so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but just bear with me. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, I have a merch shop, jezebelvibes.com/shop. I'll link it in the description. You can check out my new Evidence for God shirt that I created to celebrate Ray Comfort responding to one of my videos. That was a really big moment for me. And so if you want to go and celebrate that with me or buy one of my other shirts and support me, I'll put the link in the description. I'm also on TikTok at Christy.Berg. So let's get into it. Let's read through the 10 commandments and let's talk about it. So it's important to note that the 10 commandments show up in both Deuteronomy and Exodus, and there are also two versions of the 10 commandments that do not match up with one another at all. We're not going to get into that today. I want to address the 10 commandments that Christians put up in their courthouses, because that's really the important part we need to be addressing. So we're going to read from Deuteronomy chapter 5, starting in verse 5. And Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the rules that I speak in your hearing today, and you shall learn them and be careful to do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us, not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us who are all here alive today. The Lord spoke with you face to face in the mountain out of the midst of the fire, while I stood between the Lord and you at that time to declare to you the word of the Lord. For you were afraid because of the fire. You did not go to the mountain." This is what he said. So here are your commandments. Verse 6, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." So he's got to start this by reminding them, hey, I'm God. I brought you out of slavery. Yeah, sure, I allowed you to become enslaved in the first place, but I brought you out of it after a really long time. So you should be grateful and you should follow all of my commands. Verse 7, "You shall have no other gods before me." So this is the first of the 10 commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. I think it's very interesting how this is worded, because I do believe at that time, Israelites may have believed that other gods did exist, or there were other gods that were worshipped by other people. They acknowledged these other gods, and it's clear to see. It doesn't say, "I am the one and only God, worship me," or "You shall not worship all of those fake other gods." It says, "You shall have no other gods before me." So this kind of implies that there are other gods out there. Who are these other gods is what I want to know. The first and most important commandment that God gives to his people is, do not worship anyone else. The most important thing that you need to know is that I must be worshiped because I am so great and I am your God and I created you and I brought you out of slavery. And so you must obey me, and you cannot obey anybody else. I'm the only one. I'm jealous. I think that there are probably other rules that could have gone in that number one spot. Maybe treat all people with compassion and kindness. That would have been a really good first rule. But, God is a little more concerned with your focus on him than he is concerned with your focus on other people. And if we keep reading, we'll see that. So the first verse, or the first commandment, no other gods before me. All right. Second one, you shall not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Whoo! I always just heard that it was don't carve an idol, but this is so much more loaded. You shall not make a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So this isn't just don't have idols. This is, hey, do not make carvings that depict anything on heaven or earth or anything else. You're not allowed to carve. No carving for you, okay? But this is the second commandment, okay? The first commandment is, hey, no other gods. The second commandment is don't carve things. And certainly don't bow down and serve them. Why? Because God is jealous. And because God visits the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate him. So in God's perfect moral code that is meant to be an example for all people on how to live a perfect, moral, righteous life, God is explaining that he is so jealous for his people, and that if they do bad things, he's going to punish their children in the third and fourth generation for that, because, that's the right and moral thing to do, I guess. Like, how is this a part of this perfect moral system? Like, how many of you watching this didn't realize that God was celebrating kin punishment in his perfect moral system? Because I totally forgot about this. I'm just wondering why this is even in here, why the celebration of kin punishment is in this perfect moral system. And I wonder how many people don't realize that this says this or even thinks about it when they read it. How many Christians read through the 10 Commandments, read that God is punishing children for the sins of their parents, which is just a completely immoral and awful thing to do. They're reading that and they're just going right through it. And they're like, yeah, this is perfect. This is a great moral system. Let's put this in our classrooms. And then, of course, it says, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So if you love me and you do everything I say, well, then I'll show you my love. But you must earn it. Which is weird because God doesn't need to earn our love. So seems really one-sided. Verse 11, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Now, I've learned in the last several years that taking God's name in vain is not what people used to tell me that it was. I used to believe that taking God's name in vain was like using God's name in a cuss word or saying, oh my God. Here's a fun story. When I was in youth group, I had a friend who was also the pastor's daughter, and she told me that if anyone ever said, oh my God, that would be blasphemy and that they would never be forgiven for that. And if I had ever said, oh my God, in the past, that I just could not be forgiven. And I probably spent a couple of weeks living in absolute fear because I had said, oh my God, before, and I was taking the Lord's name in vain and I was being blasphemous. So I lived in complete fear that I was going to hell and there was nothing I could do about it because I was never going to be forgiven. So that was pretty funny. It's funny that it came from the pastor's kid. But this whole idea of taking the Lord's name in vain, I mean, if you just say it, taking the Lord's name in vain, obviously, like when you're doing something in vain, you're doing something, kind of for yourself or to promote your own agenda. And so when it says don't take the name of the Lord in vain, I think what it's saying is don't use the name of God to promote your own agenda, or promote your own ungodly agenda. And if you look around at pretty much every pastor and church and televangelist and Christian political leader, I think that's exclusively what they're doing is taking the name of God and they're using it to promote their own agenda. So I think that we could accuse every Christian leader of doing this in some capacity. But we are 3 of these commandments in. There's only 10 of them. We're 3 in, and we've got don't have any other gods. Do not make an idol for yourself. Don't carve any images and don't bow down to them. And don't take the Lord's name in vain. So the first 3 are all about how you can serve God, how you can make God happy. Keep if we keep going, it goes into verse 12, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock. So your donkey can't work on Sunday. Okay. It says, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So it seems kind of nice, I guess, hey, make sure you rest on this day. But if you don't, you will be killed is pretty much what it says later on. So we are almost halfway through these 10 verses. We're 40% of the way through the 10 commandments. And not one time has God talked about how you're supposed to treat your fellow human beings. It's so far all been about how to treat God, how to make God feel really good, how to boost God's ego. And that those are the most important commandments to this God at this point in time. Now, it's really fascinating. If you actually look at the text and you see how much text is here versus how much text is to come with the other verses or with the other commandments, I think it's so fascinating that he spends so much time elaborating on these first 4 commandments about how I'm so great and I'm God and I did this for you and you're supposed to follow me and great am I. And this is why you're supposed to follow me. But then it goes on to kind of shift focus from God and onto other people. And it's just like spouted out really quick. So he starts with verse 16, honor your father and mother as the Lord commanded you, that your days may be long and may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God has given you. So again, honor your father and mother because God commanded you, because God gave you this land. This is still kind of all about God, and the kind of explanation given is still about kind of God's ego and how great he is. And then it just says, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. They're just straight and to the point, no explanation given. It's not, hey, don't murder because the people around you deserve love and respect. And they're God's people and he loves them too. There's no like extra information given here. It's just, hey, don't murder. Moving on. We don't need to explain. As if it was so much more important to explain how great God was in these first few verses about how you could fill his ego. And then the stuff about other people is just kind of added on as a quick second thought. But going back up, it says, honor your mother and father as the Lord commanded you, that your days may be long. What if your mother and father are serial killers? What if they're abusers? What if they're not Christian and they want to worship these other, they want you to make carved images. They say, hey, we got to worship these other gods and we want you to carve an image of this God and bow down to it. Well, are you supposed to not make a carved image and bow down to it and respect God? Or are you supposed to honor your mother and father? Because these are now two conflicting things. And I know what the Christian will say. They'll say God comes first. I've talked to religious leaders or Christian leaders about, how you honor a parent that isn't worthy of honor. And I know that's a tricky one in Christian circles. There's a lot of nuance there, and I can appreciate that. But if you're just reading and you're saying these are the rules, you're supposed to always honor your parents? Always? Even when your parents aren't worthy of honor, even when your parents are doing bad things? You have to break the 10 commandments in order to honor people that might be doing things that are very bad. Being a parent doesn't make you a good person. And so it's interesting that there's this emphasis on you have to honor your mother and father, and there's no exception given. There's no, but if your mother and father are bad people, don't honor them. It doesn't say that. It just doesn't say that. It doesn't give room for nuance. And I just think that the ultimate moral code for all people should probably give a little more explanation and give a little more nuance and give exceptions to the rule. Unless there's no exception to the rule and God still wants you to honor your parents even if they're really bad people. Verse 17, you shall not murder. Great. Okay, that's a good one. I'm just wondering if it's considered murder when God drowns the entire world in a flood, or if it's considered murder when God instructs his people to go around to all of the neighboring cities and to attack attack them and kill them all and save the women and children as plunder. I wonder if that was murder when they were like killing all of the people in all the surrounding cities because they didn't want to worship this God. I mean, according to John 3:16, God gave up his only son. So technically God murdered his own son. And so I think it's interesting that God can murder over and over and over again throughout the Bible, but you shall not murder, because God is always going to hold you to a higher standard than he holds himself. Kind of like how the church and the pastors are always going to hold you to a higher standard than they themselves hold. You shall not commit adultery. Okay, fine. Where's the one about rape? Where's the one that says you shall not rape? Because cheating is pretty bad. You know, you probably shouldn't break that trust with your partner. I agree. Don't commit adultery. But also don't rape people. And I think that that's a more important rule. Maybe he could have slid that one in somewhere. I'm not seeing it yet. Not yet. However, in verse 19, it says, you shall not steal. And I have to point out that countless times when I have pointed out the fact that the Bible does not say don't rape, that Christians respond and they say, well, it says don't steal. And when you're raping, you're stealing something from someone else. You're taking something that's not yours. So technically that's stealing. So rape falls into that. As if God couldn't have been specific. God can say, do not carve an image of anything under earth or of earth or whatever. You know, don't make a carved image. But he can't say don't rape. He's very specific in other areas, but for some reason, we just have to assume that rape falls under this umbrella of don't steal. And I think that that's very convenient for this book that never actually condemns rape, ever. Like the Bible never says don't rape people. It's not nice. It really condones it more so than it condemns it. You shall not steal. Okay, well, what if your child is starving and you need to feed them in order to keep them alive? There's no nuance here. It doesn't say don't steal, but if your child is starving, then do what you have to do. There's no nuance there. Shouldn't there be more than just don't steal? Shouldn't there be some elaboration? He could elaborate on the holy day. He could elaborate on not taking his name in vain. He can elaborate on not making a carved image, but he cannot elaborate on not stealing. He can't make exceptions. He can't provide the nuance in that very weird black and white rule, because do not steal is so broad. And it's like, how do you know where to draw the line on that one? Is it really a sin for someone to steal to feed themselves or their family? It's stealing, and there's no exception made. It doesn't say, do what you got to do. So I'm just wondering, where is there an exception in that? It's not clear. There's no clarity there. And I would think that God would be able to provide a little bit more clarity for things like that for people who are genuinely curious. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't lie. Okay. All right, God. So you're way more concerned with people lying than you are with people raping other people. Got it. Also, where's the one about not owning people as property? Do not own people as property. They are not your slaves. They are human beings. The Lord your God has made each individual person a sentient being that deserves autonomy. I don't see that one anywhere in here. But don't tell a lie. That's really important. Make sure you do not lie. Own people as property, that's good and fine. Lying, that's very, very bad. And lastly, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant, or his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Notice that everything being listed here is the Israelites' property. So don't desire your neighbor's house, his field, his servant, his ox, his donkey, and lumped in with that is his wife. Now, we can see right here, we were just talking about him not condemning slavery, saying don't own people. Well, here he's basically saying you can have a servant, just don't be jealous of your neighbor's servant. You're allowed to have slaves. In this perfect moral code, he's endorsing slavery. Although, of course, there were going to be people who see these were bondservants. And yes, maybe they were. Maybe they were, but they were still considered property, as this verse shows. And I don't think anybody should be considered anybody else's property, especially not somebody's wife. And so notice how the Bible is literally putting a woman in a, not even second class. Like, I don't even think you can call the woman second class in this situation. She is property. She is the neighbor's wife. She is not her own person. She is his property, along with his donkey, his field, and his servants. This is clearly showing that this biblical author did not see women as their own beings, that they saw women as the property of men. And this is a theme throughout the Bible. And you would think that this God who never changes and who is so great, and with God, there is no male or there is no female, there is no slave, there is no free. Everybody is just equal in the same. You would think that this God would set up a system by which women were their own people, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. It seems as though the wife is the property, and God is saying, hey, don't be jealous. Don't be jealous of your neighbor's wife. Because that is so much more important than don't own people as property and don't rape. I think it's fascinating that we have really come around here to don't covet, don't be jealous. When in verse 8, you shall not make yourself a carved image, any likeness that is anything on heaven in heaven above or earth beneath. Don't bow down to them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. So God is jealous for his people. Why? Because he doesn't want them to go and worship other gods. Why? Because he's envious of the people of those other gods. He's literally saying, don't be jealous of what your neighbor has. But if there are other gods and they are God's neighbor, then he is jealous of what the other gods have when other people go and worship him. He says, don't go and worship other gods because I'm jealous. I'm jealous for you. I don't like it when other gods have your attention. But you better not be jealous of your neighbor's wife or his donkey or his ox. Like, do you see how very human this is? How very patriarchal this is? How they have very clearly set up a system by which God, the man, he is great. He is to be revered. You must not do anything against him. You must not speak out against him. You must honor him. You must obey him. It's very clear to see that this was not designed to create a perfect moral system and to create a system by which all people are well and free and happy. This was just to keep people in line, to keep people blind and obedient and doing whatever God says. And when I just sit down and read it, I am so far from seeing this perfect moral system. I think that we could come up with such a better system for how you're supposed to behave. One that doesn't include treating women as property. One that doesn't include endorsing owning people as property, making them your property, making them your slave. One that doesn't just focus on building up God's ego, even though God does whatever he wants and admits to punishing children for the crimes of their parents. We could create a much better system that doesn't look like this. And with that being said, let's compare what we just read in Deuteronomy about the 10 Commandments to the 7 tenets of the satanic temple. Now, when Christians hear this, they're going to clutch their pearls and go, oh my goodness, not the satanic temple. But, listen and decide for yourself what you think is the superior moral guide. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Wow, how demonic is that? The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Christians love justice, okay? They always talk about how much they love justice, how important justice is. And here we are, already talking about justice in the second tenet of the satanic temple. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's will alone. So bodily autonomy, you have freedom. Aren't Christians always talking about how important free will is? This is free will. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own, which Again, I think Christians would love this one because it even says you have the freedom to offend, and the Christians love to talk about how offensive their message is, and they should have the freedom to share it. So far, this is really supporting the Christian mission. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care to never to distort scientific facts to fit one's belief. I know that the Christians won't like that one because they prefer blind faith in things that they can't prove over science, even though those that are disagreeing with this right now are watching this through technology that was invented using science. So they do trust science when it suits them, just not when it comes to the really important stuff. And the next one is people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. Again, it's so demonic. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. I wonder how many Christians have actually read the tenets of the Satanic Temple and if they've ever actually compared them to their own God's rules, and how you can look at the two and think that the Ten Commandments is a superior moral system when it has nothing to do with free will. It has nothing to do with being compassionate toward people. This actually makes a tenet to live in compassion, to be active in your compassion. But notice how in the Ten Commandments, there's nothing about active compassion. It says don't murder, don't steal, don't be jealous. It's things that you shouldn't do. But it doesn't actually give you any further rules to act compassionately. Now, Christians will say Jesus came along and he reinterpreted the law and he made it clear you're supposed to love your neighbor. And that's great. But if we're just paying attention to the Ten Commandments and what the Ten Commandments say, I am not seeing any call to be a genuinely good person that wants to spread love and compassion and goodness. I see a set of rules that is designed to keep people focused on God, obeying God, worshiping God, and then just not doing things that hurt other people. But there's no call to serve others like there is to serve God. And God put us here with everyone else, and he expects our sole focus to be him and his needs and serving him. And I'm wondering, why? What does God get out of being served by human beings? What can human beings do to serve a God who can do anything for himself? Why does this God need to be worshiped? Why does he care if you're looking at other gods or making a carved image or taking his name in vain? Okay, yeah, taking his name in vain, that one I actually agree with, actually, just because, a lot of people use God for their own agenda and it causes a lot of harm. So that's one I'm going to stick with. But the others, it's so focused on how you can serve God. And it really has such a minute focus on how you can actually serve other human beings. And if we're all here with human beings and God is just up there in the distant land kind of residing over everything, why does he need to be served? Or why does he need us to pay attention to him? Why can't he give us rules to be kind to our fellow human beings, since that's who we have to live and interact with on a daily basis? And just at the end of the day, I just think that these Ten Commandments are just a way to kind of uphold this patriarchal system, this standard that people don't really think about. So many people love the Ten Commandments. They want the Ten Commandments up to be seen. They think that they're a great moral code, and they don't really actually read or think about it. They know the Ten Commandments, but they don't read the words. They don't read the context, the things that are being said in between, and the general focus of this, which is not to be a good human being and to spread love and compassion into the world. It's to serve God, because he really, really needs you to serve him. And that's why he created you, so he could be served by you. And that is the whole point of these commands. I think I could come up with a better system. I think the Satanic Temple has come up with a better system. And if God is truly a God of love and compassion and goodness, then he would have put out a system by which people would be encouraged to be loving and compassionate. But instead, all this system does is give people the feeling of superiority, where they can kind of stand up, point their fingers at everyone else and say, these are God's rules and you must follow them. But it has nothing to do with being moral. It has nothing to do with being good. And it's just all about getting in line. Get in line. Follow the system. Get your ass on the conveyor belt. Let us wash your brain. Follow these rules. Don't question it. Don't think. Just say these are your rules and move on with your life and love God. And that's the end of it. I just feel like life is so much more complex than that. I think that life is so much more nuanced than that. And we need more than what this has to offer. And then if you keep reading, there's all kinds of other crazy rules added in. These are not the only commands that God gave. And then these days Christians will say, well, we're not to live by the old law, but this is part of the old law, and they love the 10 Commandments. So I think even most Christians are confused about how they feel about the 10 Commandments. But I would encourage any Christian to sit down and read this and to really think about the words being written, what you're seeing here, especially the bits about being a jealous God, visiting people to, for the iniquity of their parents to the third and fourth generation, these things that are added in that they don't really talk about in church, that to me are really crucial because they convey a very specific point, theme, objective, which is get in line because this is what God says and you don't get to question it. And this is the best. These are the best rules we've got. This is it. This is the moral code. Live by it. Move on. Shut up. At least that's how I feel. So I think that's kind of it. I really thought it would be interesting to add to my series of deconstructing Bible stories since the 10 Commandments are such a central part of the Christian journey, which is so funny because these commandments were not given to Christians, and even Christians admit that they're not supposed to follow the old law, but they really love the 10 Commandments. And I can't tell you how often I hear that the 10 Commandments are the perfect moral system, that you don't need anything else, that if you follow the 10 Commandments, you'll live a perfectly moral life. But as we've seen, there's not room for nuance. This also promotes owning people as property. This promotes jealousy while also telling you not to be jealous. It's such a confused system. It was very obviously written by ancient people with a very specific agenda in mind and a very specific thought process. And I have to say, I don't find any moral value in this, that I could have decided on my own that I'm not going to murder people because, well, I have no desire to murder people. It's just not something I want to do. God didn't need to tell me not to murder people. He didn't need to tell me that. But I do think he probably needed to tell people not to rape since so many sexual assaults are coming out of the Christian churches today. But we're not going to get into that one. I'm just going to say that's it for the day. I think I've said all I want to say. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you thought, whether you agree or you disagree, you feel like there's something I missed. I'm sure there is. There always is. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do the thing. And I'll see you next time.